pulls one on the ground, a chance for two. To second one, back to first. And the Mets' agonizing 3.5-month slow motion collapse is complete. It is unfathomable that this collection of talent winds up outside of an expanded playoff system after having the best record in baseball for the first 2.5 months of the season. Everything goes wrong over the last 3.5 months, and the Mets find themselves on the outside looking in.
About as stunned as the fans. I think a lot of the players felt as though this day would never come, that they'd be able to turn it on at some point and not have to endure this. But they weren't able to do that.
Well, you got a Marlins team. Sorry, Ron. That in 2007, 2008, we don't have to remind Met fans that have done this. They took 2 out of 3 here. The Mets took the series. They're in. They didn't do it. So the Marlins once again do the Mets in, and this has got to be just so heartbreaking and disappointing for the players. But they didn't get it done.
2007, 2008, 2025. The Mets get brilliant pitching in game number 161 to put themselves in position, but are unable to seal the deal in the final day of the season and fall to the Marlins, who knocked them out of the postseason yet again.
You were talking about the 21 games over 500. The Mets started where the first 2 months of the season, their starting pitching was the best in baseball. But through injuries and inconsistencies, they ended up being a starting pitching staff that could not get to the 5th inning, which led to an exhausted bullpen. Their defense went in the tank in the second half, and you ended up with none of that working and a top-heavy lineup, and that's all you had left.
You know, Gary, they're gonna say the Met pitching, but you know what? It was a team effort here. Remember the first half of the year, the Mets did not hit in the clutch the whole first half of the season. All the wins and losses, they add up. You know, when you have the winning season, you put it all together, both offensively and defensively. The Mets pitching carried them in that first half, and then the Met offense kind of turned it on in the second half. But, you know, you got to look at their record from June on. Well under 500.
I'm watching the Marlins. They just took a team picture in front of their dugout like they're going to the postseason.
Oh, this was their World Series.
Oh,
yep, they took 2 out of 3, knocked the Mets out of the postseason. We saw the Reds celebrating in Milwaukee. It seems almost impossible that the Mets could get the seasons they did from Soto and Alonso and Lindor and Nimmo and still fall short of this 12-team playoff system.
Many of the numbers historical for this franchise and for their own careers. Yeah, it's just hard to believe that this day has come.
You know, we've always talked, it was a top-heavy lineup, Gary. And I found myself for the first time in the booth covering the Mets saying we got to flip the lineup to get to that big 4, and that big 4 has to come through. You know, they have to do it. It didn't get done.
You got to a game 162 with a team like this, and you didn't even know who you wanted to pitch, who was going to pitch. That's what you end up with. A game 162 that you had to have, you didn't even know who you needed to pitch.
First time in Edwin Diaz's career that he threw the most innings for his team that day. He did his job 6 up and 6 down, but yeah, there was no offense, so it didn't really matter. One of the most disappointing years that the Mets had ever suffered through their 64-year history. Expectations could not have been higher. The start could not have been better. Coming off a magical year last year, and it ends in ashes. 83 and 79, far below what anybody would have anticipated, as the Marlins win the finale 4-0 to knock the Mets out of the postseason and put the Cincinnati Reds in their stead.